Hello everyone, I'm Renee Lobo and welcome to the Renee Lobo Report. The Sabnani court case caught the attention of practically every Indian American in the tri-state area. A wealthy couple from Muttontown, Long Island, in a modern slavery case. It became news all over, and Varsha Sabnani and Mahinda Sabnani were convicted on all charges in a 12-count federal indictment last year. The sentence is going to be taking place next year. Giving us an update on this case, we have with us the two defense attorneys, Jeffrey Hoffman, who is representing Mrs. Varsha Sabnani in this trial, and attorney Stephen Scaring, who represents Mr. Mahinda Sabnani. Thank you very much for coming here. Of course, when we saw that they were convicted, there were charges of involuntary servitude, forced labor. They were really very strong charges over here, and the jury found them guilty. The Sabnanis have pleaded not guilty to this. The sentencing has been delayed. It was supposed to be March 28th. It has been delayed now. Now, as defense attorneys, I know that the motion to have a new trial was denied. Now you have put up an additional appeal to the federal court. Where is the Sabnani case at this point of time?
Well, we're awaiting sentencing. The appeal doesn't start until after the sentencing, because one of the things that you can do in your appeal, in addition to appealing what we feel were many errors in the trial and expect to get a new trial, you can also appeal the sentence if you feel the sentence is improper. So we have to wait until after the sentence in order to go forward with the appeal.
Now the sentencing for Mrs. Varsha Sabnani takes place in May?
It's presently scheduled for May, correct.
And for Mr. Mahinda Sabnani?
In June.
In June.
Yeah.
And at this time, she is in prison.
That's correct.
And he's in home confinement.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I know that the latest news, the reports were that it might go on for 40 years or life, but the probation department has a different story that it might be much, much less.
Well, the probation department has initially given us their recommendation, which in Varsha's case is around the 9 or 10 year range, but that's their initial draft recommendation. We can then comment on that and give what we think is the appropriate guideline range. After all that's done, it comes before the judge, but even there, the guideline range is no longer mandatory as it used to be. So there's really no particular requirement by the judge as to whether or not he gives a probation or anything above that.
Now, what's your read on this court case? Do you feel that there are other elements over there? Are they being framed? Is the jury being racist? Is there being bias or prejudice in this case? What is your take on this?
You know, from the beginning of this case, and both Steve and I were not involved in the beginning of this case. We came on a number of months after, but from the beginning of this case, there was an enormous amount of publicity. The publicity was horrific. It showed terrible pictures of Varsha. You know, you can take a picture that shows you in a good light or a bad light. Whatever pictures they took that showed her looking horrible, they put out there. One of the newspapers, I can't remember which one, dubbed her Cruella, which then became the name of the case. And when you put Cruella and slavery together, those two buzzwords created a terrible, terrible storm of bad publicity, and it just never ceased. And we believe that this infected the jury, and one of the things we found out is during the jury deliberations, two of the jurors were out in the parking lot saying guilty, 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 when they weren't even supposed to be discussing the case, and long before the case had ended. So we're very concerned that this horrific publicity caused a very unfair trial.
Let me just comment further on that. The publicity was so horrific, and it was designed to prejudice the jury. I mean, the government made statements that were totally inappropriate, and they became the whipping. The Sabnanis became the whipping boys for everybody, and it became almost a joke. And it was fed on by the local tabloids, especially with the Cruella word. And the case was turned into something that it never was. I mean, this case never should have been framed as a slavery case. That's not what it was. It was never even close to that. But the government through their comments in the initial stages, created this atmosphere where the Sabnanis were ridiculed, they were laughed at, and they were made to look like the worst people in the world, which made it almost impossible to get a fair jury. And what's unfortunate about this is a really good family. Mahenda came to this country when he was a young boy. He married, he raised 4 wonderful children, he developed a wonderful business where he manufactures product in the United States, which is the best thing in the world, and ships it to countries outside of the United States. He did everything. He earned a wonderful living, he built he had a house, his family, and the government is literally trying to take everything away from him. They're trying to take his house, they're trying to take every penny he has. And they're trying to put both of them in jail for extended periods of time that are, with all due respect to their position in the government, ridiculous. We think that the infection to the jury so clearly affected our ability to get a fair trial for them. That's demonstrated by 2 jurors in the parking lot before this case ever reached summation stage were joking and shouting, "Guilty, guilty, guilty." I mean, that's an awful thing to think about in the justice system, the United States justice system, to have jurors, before they even heard the law from the judge or the summations, to have jurors in a parking lot laughing and shouting, "Guilty, guilty," without any appreciation of the impact of that on Mahenda Sabnani and Vasha Sabnani and their 4 children. We're very troubled by this case.
Now, you know, Indian Americans have always been like a role model minority and excelling in every field of endeavor. Why would they have such kind of negative publicity?
You know,
even before the trial started?
When the prosecutor made their arguments during the bail, they used words like slavery. They used words like, "This is the worst case we've ever seen," etc. And they talked about the rich Sabnanis and the poor maids. So they created this atmosphere that people fed into. You know, everybody likes to hate the rich person. Everybody likes to they feel better if someone else who has done better than they or have been taken down. And so it was a classic case of the government portraying them in a way so that the jury pool would hate them. And that's what happened. And of course, with the picture of Vasha Sabnani and the use of the word Cruella and the way it was joked around by most people, they really never had.
You know, you ask an interesting question. And while we don't have a specific answer for you, we wonder whether or not there was some mistreatment because these were people of Indian heritage who did as well as they did. And were the powers that be unhappy that they did so well with all the things that are going on with immigration and anti-immigration? This seemed to be a way to take away from a role model minority and put some bad into a situation that would help people if they wanted to say, well, the Indian folks aren't so nice. Here's an example. One of the things that was particularly upsetting